Well, now that the Alex Bregman saga is officially behind us, all attention turns to camp and the players that are Detroit Tigers. We'll talk about the first 2 days of spring camp all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, February 14th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. We'll hopefully send you off into the weekend here with everything you need to know about the first couple of days of Detroit Tigers camp. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Let's talk ball. I am genuinely... I was thinking about what I said on yesterday's show with the Bregman situation and whatnot. And I still feel the exact same way. And that's good, because sometimes I will spew and get, my emotions will get the best of me, maybe. And I'll say a bunch of stuff and then a day later be like, all right, well, now that I've calmed down, maybe we can talk about it. Like, I feel exactly the same way 24 hours removed. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the weight that has just been lifted off the fan base here. Like, the saga is over. And I'm still, disappointed in the result. And everything I said yesterday, I still feel. I'm still, disappointed or whatever. But like, I'm ready to see who's prepared to take over third. I'm ready to just focus on the Detroit Tigers. It was so exhausting having camp starting and having these reports flying out of camp, and then also out of like the corner of your eye having to peek over at like someone who's not even a part of the organization and see how that was going to affect everything the Tigers were doing. So I want to start with that. Like, I'm ready, baby. I'm ready to talk ball. I'm ready for Matt Vierling to be this team's third baseman on opening day. I'm ready for Jace Young to get an opportunity. I'm ready for Andy Ibanez to crush left-handed pitching. Like, I am so ready for the Detroit Tigers and the players who choose to put on that Old English D every day and get prepared for what hopefully is a really fun and successful season. We're about 2 days in. At the time of this recording, we're 2 days into camp, position players haven't even reported yet. It's technically just pitchers and catchers, but a lot of position players are already down there. Torkelson's already down there. We'll talk about him a little bit later. He had a heck of a day on Wednesday. I mean, my goodness. But I think the biggest story, sans Bregman, to come out of the first 2 days of Tigers camp is Alex Cobb's injury. So the first injury report of the year, I want to just give a tip of the cap to Scott Harris and co. This is something that I appreciate so much about this regime and this front office, is the transparency with the injured list. And that doesn't mean that they exactly tell us necessarily every single injury that is going on or every the exact diagnosis of everything, but it is far easier to just know, hey, once a week on Sundays or whatever day it ends up being this year, we are going to get a full rundown of the current status of every injured player in the Tigers organization. They have a minor league version too. They do once a month instead of once a week. And that's just, it's so awesome. As a fan, as a part of the media, just in general, that is very, very helpful. So tip of the cap, I appreciate that a lot. I think it's very professional. Let's start with the all of the players not named Alex Cobb that are on the injury list, because I think that's actually some pretty good news all around. And let's start with some good news. We've had some bad news lately. Let's start with some good news here. Javi Baez, right hip labral repair, is completing full hitting and defensive drills. He will continue to progress his return to play running progression upon his arrival to camp. So they talked to AJ about that a little bit. And it sounds like Javi is in a situation where the only thing he's not doing is running. But he is taking full batting practice, taking, defensive work, moving both sides of his position, going right, left, back, forward, no problem. It's just a matter of running and running the bases. So we will see. It sounds like when he reports to camp officially is when they will see where his running is and where it currently stands. But obviously a lot of eyes are going to be on Javi this year in spring training and in spring training. If he plays in spring training, they're saying he might only get a couple of games in at the very end of spring. But I think in camp, a lot of eyes are going to be on him because shortstop is going to be a talked about thing if Trey Sweeney ends up hitting decently well. Even if he doesn't, it's probably going to be pretty talked about given how Javi has performed as a Tiger. Alex Cobb is second on this list. Like I said, we'll talk about him bigger picture in a second. Wilmer Flores, right shoulder inflammation, received an injection in January for right shoulder soreness, and he is completing rehab daily. Wilmer Flores is so fascinating to follow because his career has just been kind of a roller coaster. Like he started off as an undrafted free agent and not like, oh, he was an international signee. Like that happens all the time. A draft eligible undrafted free agent, which is very rare that you find a player in that category that ends up being like a really solid Major League Baseball player. And it was in the 2020 season, so only 5 rounds. That definitely had something to do with it. But started off as really kind of a nothing prospect. Then in 2022 was phenomenal. Like one of the biggest bright spots in the organization, which there weren't very many, if you remember 2022. He was lighting up high single A, went to Erie, struggled at the beginning, and then lit up Erie. And in 2023 had some injury problems. And then last year dealt with a little bit of injury stuff here and there, but really just kind of struggled. Like he just wasn't the same. And especially in the first half of the season, wasn't anywhere close to where people thought he was going to be a couple of years ago. Got a little bit better, I think, as the season went along. But, he's fascinating because in spring training last year, I remember almost to the day 12 months ago, coming on here and saying, Wilmer Flores, rough 2023. We'll see what happens in 2024. And then he went out in a spring training game and threw 100. And I remember coming on here and being like, oh my goodness, like he's probably going to start off in AAA still, but that's okay. Like he'll develop there. When there's an injury, he'll get called up and this will be fine. Like this will be absolutely awesome. He's pumping cheddar. Like he's pumping 100 miles an hour. And that just didn't translate over the course of the season. Now there's a difference between being a pure reliever and getting more innings, which certainly is part of it. But it's just been so weird to get a gauge on what to expect out of him going forward. So hopefully he is healthy because I think this is a pretty darn important spring training and camp for him. This is a guy that his status in the organization on the 40-man roster changes, it feels like, every month. So or like standing, obviously he's not added and removed from the 40-man every month, but you get what I'm saying. Kind of the general opinion of him changes every month. So we'll see what happens with Wilmer Flores. Hopefully he can get healthy and kind of, prove some people wrong and show that he can be that talent we thought he could be. Let's talk about Sawyer Gipson-Long, Alex Lang, Tyler Madison, and Ricky Vanasco. Then obviously, once we get through those, because those are pretty quick updates, we will get to Alex Cobb and the state of the Tigers rotation. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking to get a bigger payout, You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shots to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday recapping the action out of camp over the weekend. Today, we have the first 2 days to talk about because obviously Bregman kind of threw a wrench in the plans yesterday. This is the second time I've talked about a lot of this. You just don't know that because I had to re-record yesterday and you never saw that episode. But there was a lot of news and notes, and that makes sense. First couple of days, the media's there for the first time. These guys are in front of a microphone and a camera for the first time in 4 or 5 months. Makes sense. There's a lot of information all at once, but that's good for us, and that's kind of fun. Again, baseball's back, and that's a beautiful thing. Sawyer Gipson-Long, left hip labral repair, and obviously Tommy John. He is throwing bullpen sessions twice weekly. His next bullpen is today, February 14th. Alex Lang, right lat strain, is throwing bullpen sessions twice weekly. His next bullpen is Saturday, so tomorrow, February 15th. Tyler Madison, also Tommy John, is throwing bullpen sessions twice weekly. His next scheduled bullpen is Saturday as well, February 15th. And Ricky Vanasco had right hip labral repair and is playing catch 6 times a week. So probably still a ways to go on Ricky Vanasco. But I think the hope is that Sawyer Gipson-Long and Alex Lang can be ready to maybe pitch in spring training ball at some point during spring training. I'm not going to be picky about when that is, whether it's really early in spring or really, toward the tail end. If they are just ready and the organization and AJ and the coaching staff believe that they're healthy enough to throw in a spring training game period, I will be a happy camper. So we'll see what happens there. If they're throwing bullpen sessions, that's usually a decently good sign. But Casey Mize threw bullpens for like 4 months when he was recovering from Tommy John. So you never know kind of where they stand. I am very notoriously not a doctor. Also keep an eye on Tyler Madison because he's a dog. He's a guy that I really, really liked down in the minor leagues, and I'm happy that he is hopefully going to be healthy early on in this season as well. The big injury and the big storyline out of Tigers camp, again, outside of Bregman, is obviously the injury to Alex Cobb. It is a right hip injury, and he will not be ready for opening day. They have him out maybe the first month of the regular season, so we'll see what happens there. I think there's 2 angles with this. One is the reaction and just like, does this make the signing completely not worth it? And just kind of the angle of the signing. And then there's what do you do? Like, what is the pivot? What does the rotation look like without him to start off the season? I want to start with the signing itself. I thought the reaction from the fan base was a wild overreaction to this news. Now, I said when we signed him, and I will reiterate, I still think the price tag they got him for is far more than I expected Alex Cobb to be signed for, coming off of the injury-riddled season he had last year and given his age. I fully agree with that and do not... I'm not pivoting from that stance. Okay. That is something that even if he threw 35 starts, I still would have thought. Okay. In the same breath, I think if you went into this season expecting Alex Cobb to throw 33, 35 starts, like that's kind of on you. And like, again, that's also kind of on the front office. I totally understand where people are coming from with that, but it's not like he bankrupted the team. It's not like we signed Alex Cobb so we weren't able to sign anybody else. It's not like we lost Bregman because we went after Alex Cobb. And at the end of the day, if he misses the first like 3 times through the rotation and then is healthy the rest of the year, that's a success. If he has a sub-4 ERA, which he's done nearly every year in his career, really, but every year of recent memory, if he has a sub-4 and is back in May and is then healthy the rest of the year, that's a huge win, and that still makes this a successful signing. So, again, I think it's an overpay when they put pen to paper. I'm not denying that. But the narrative of oh wow, this is already a huge failure of a signing in February because he's going to miss opening day. I think that's wild. It might be. He might throw 4 innings for the Tigers. He might. He threw 6 innings total last year, 12, whatever it was. He might. And if that's the case, then that's completely on the front office. But, none of us have a crystal ball. He could still throw, 20 to 25 starts this year. So we'll see. And the bigger reason why I don't have a super negative reaction to this is this collar is driving me nuts. Have you just seen me just messing with this shirt? I love downtown Pontiac represent, but what? Oh my God. Okay. I think the bigger reason why I am pretty calm throughout, this injury and why this is really not that big of a deal to me is because the Tigers have a ton of pitching depth, and the difference between Alex Cobb and the arms that they are going to bring in to replace him, I think is probably somewhat minimal and probably is not that big of a deal. So you look at what the rotation could be now. Next week, we're going to have our first of several. We'll end up doing this a few times throughout spring training, but roster projections. And I think in that, this helps Jobe a ton. And that kind of goes without saying. But if you're one of those people that's really expecting Jackson Jobe, or not expecting, but really wants Jackson Jobe to make the team, which I would imagine is most people because he's awesome, this really, really raises his odds a ton. And then you have the same conversation with, okay, if Jobe is going to make the rotation, then, and that doesn't quite go without saying, but he's certainly going to be the favorite. We'll see, unless he just implodes in spring training. I would imagine that that's probably what the organization wants at this point, considering he already debuted. But I think then when you have another spot in the rotation, all eyes turn to Casey Mize. I think that's going to have to be earned in spring. I think, and again, Jobe's will too, but I think that Mize is more so. That 5th spot is really going to have to be earned by someone, whether it is Matt Manning or Casey Mize or Brant Herter or Cater Montero. Whoever whoever's name you want to throw out there is fine. But I really do think that it is going to have to be, okay, we clearly saw this guy go above and beyond and really kind of take this position and really grab it by the throat and run with it. So we'll see what happens. But I think the leader is the odds-on favorite on February 14th. So we're going to take it with a grain of salt. But the odds-on favorite now, I think, is probably Skubal, Flaherty, Olsen, Jobe, Mize. And if that's the rotation on opening day, I'm a happy camper. Yeah, I am. That sounds like a whole lot of fun. There's a whole lot of upside there. There's a ton of swing and miss. There's a ton of talent. That is it has the potential to still be a darn good rotation. And when Alex Cobb joins, he can replace the weakest link of those 5. If it ends up being Mize, then so be it. If Jobe does need more time to develop, then so be it. If somebody gets hurt at the same time that Cobb's coming back, then there you go. Makes your life easier. I really do think no matter what combination of those 5 or 6 names you throw in there, this is a really strong rotation with a lot of upside. Let's talk about a small trade the Tigers made. We'll talk about Torkelson a little bit. Then we'll talk about a signing the Tigers made, adding to their bullpen. We'll talk about all of that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. 3rd and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So the Tigers made a trade. They DFA'd Mason Englert earlier in the week to make some room on the 40-man roster, and he was traded. So instead of just letting him go to waivers or outright cutting him, whatever decision they would have come to when he was designated for assignment, they decided to trade him, and it's to the Rays again. So the Tigers just DFAing people and trading them to Tampa. It seems like, obviously, Alex Faedo, that happened almost copy and paste with him about a month ago, maybe a little bit less than a month ago, maybe more. I don't know. Time is a construct. Mason Englert to the Rays. The return is Drew Somers, who is a left-handed pitcher, was drafted in the 11th round in 2022, had a 4-even ERA in high A ball last year as a pure reliever, and had really solid strikeout numbers. I think this is an absolute win. And that is because I don't think there was a path for Mason Englert to really ever be an established part of this bullpen again. And that's not me like trying to talk about like Mason Englert's talent as a pitcher or anything like that, or even his production, even though it wasn't that great. That is just significantly more to do with the stockpile of arms and talented pitching that the Tigers have developed and they find themselves with, where you can DFA. And again, like Englert really, really struggled after that first couple of month or two after being taken in the Rule 5 a couple years ago, and really never found himself. He just doesn't have a major league fastball right now. Really like his changeup still. I'm sure Tampa will work with him and try to get him back to a point where he can be an established major league reliever. But I think when you look at the starting pitching and multi-inning relief options that the Tigers have, there is no reason to go out of your way to really hold on to Mason Englert, because I think he would be like 8th or 9th in the pecking order just because of how much talent there is in that kind of swingman role organizationally. And when it comes to Somers, again, like I think this is a guy you put in Double-A immediately, and we'll see how he does. Again, good strikeout numbers. As a lefty, you can work with that. I think that this is a win for the organization. Spencer Torkelson talked to the media for the first time. Really just polar opposite opinions here. I have two things that I heard from him and saw out of him. One I loved, one I didn't. So I want to give a lot of credit to all of our beat writers. Evan Woodbury of M Live has just been all over it, tweeting out a lot of quotes, interviewing a lot of people. I think he deserves a ton of credit here. So I want to shout him out. You can go to his social media and see all of the great quotes and such that he's got so far at camp. I thought Torkelson gave an amazing answer when asked about the Gleyber Torres signing. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was incredibly mature, and I thought that it was a really good kind of mindset and perspective to have. And he essentially said, this is hardcore paraphrasing, this is not the exact quote, but he essentially said that he didn't necessarily expect to get pushed out of the lineup by, via a free agent. But at the same time, he hasn't proven that he can be a consistent everyday major league hitter, and that the guys in the front office have a difficult job to do, and they have to put, the best production they can on the field every day. And he understands that he has not been that. And with Gleyber on the team, he is not that. So I give him a ton of credit for that answer. It made me really kind of look back and go, wow, like I'm really rooting for him. And I really, really want him to figure this out and be that 30-plus home run hitter, because, golly, that is awesome to hear. Then Chris McCoskey of the Detroit News put out an article talking about Spencer Torkelson. And in the article mentioned that he does not watch video or look at any of the analytics and numbers and whatnot that the Tigers coaching staff have to offer hitters, because I think the quote was, "That's not me." And I understand that there is seemingly this divide between you either love analytics or you hate analytics. And I really think that both of those extremes are that they are extremes, and that baseball is beautiful because I think it's ridiculous to deny information, but at the same time, you got to know baseball too. And I think in an instance like this, from a fan perspective, when you hear that a guy that you had such high hopes for and that has such high expectations, and the organization really wants to be a specific type of player going forward, and has just been struggling and has not come close to reaching that outside of 2 months in 2024 or 2023 rather. um I understand the fan base's frustration with hearing that quote. Now, I am not a major league hitter. At no point in my life have I ever been even close to being a major league caliber hitter, and I will never be in the rest of my one life I get ever close to being a major league caliber hitter. I do not know the ins and outs of what it takes to be able to accomplish that. Torkelson far closer than I will ever be in my entire life. So I don't want to sit here from my couch and be like, "Oh, well, he should do this and this and this, and obviously it would just work out." That would be ridiculous of me to do. But I understand. I understand the frustration. I really do. And I think that is an instance for him where I would rather, like, like when your mom growing up was like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. That's like, it's not that he said anything mean, but like that kind of falls under that umbrella. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we just keep that to ourselves. Maybe we just keep hey, the Tigers in the Scott Harris era have completely renovated the batting cages, and they have like StatCast, and you can see the bat path and the angles and the exact placement of your hands, and it's even climate like controlled or whatever, and it's like all of this stuff is happening, and they're giving you so many tools and resources to help the hitter be better. And then you hear that the 1-1 pick that's been struggling hitting just doesn't use any of them. I understand why that is frustrating to hear. So we'll see what happens. I still root for the guy. I still am hoping that he can figure it out and make some adjustments and be that right-handed power hitter that this team so desperately needs in its lineup. Would make all of our lives so much easier if he was able to fill that role. And I'm sure he feels the same way. So continuing to root for him. Thought it was really interesting that AJ Hinch mentioned how serious camp was early on. Not that he's going to say anything different or that it ever was going to be like lax, but really kind of highlighted, why they didn't bring Clark and McGonigal to Major League camp, I should say. And that was because they basically like didn't want to F around. Like, it's pretty much obviously a paraphrase, but like kind of what he said. He was like, just kind of mentioned how they want it to be a really serious thing, and they're taking it very seriously and only bringing people that have even somewhat of a chance of making the roster. And they're not going to mess around and screw around with people just being there just to be there and just for experience. Like, we're trying to win Major League Baseball games this year, and that's the way they sought to do that. So I give him a lot of credit. The last thing I'll end you with is the Tigers signed right-handed reliever John Brebbia. 34-year-old right-handed reliever, had a 5.86 ERA last year and a 1.355 whip. That is a little... He didn't have a very good year. I'm not trying to tell you anything otherwise, but he had a 6.3 almost in Chicago with the White Sox, the worst team ever last year. And then in, albeit just 6 innings, so very much a way smaller sample size than the 50 whatever innings he gave Chicago, but did have a sub 3. It was like a 2.7, I want to say, ERA in his 6 or 7 innings with the Braves down the stretch. So maybe kind of a circumstance of environment. It's also important that like the 2 years prior to that, he was a sub 4 ERA pitcher that threw in a lot of games too. He has a career 3.8 ERA. Like I said, sub 4 in 2022 and 2023. His 2022 season, he was legitimately one of the more valuable right-handed relievers in the National League. Threw a ton of innings, appeared in 70 some odd games, and was a sub 3.2 ERA. There is a history there. 34 years old, not over the hill, not a ton of injury concerns over the last 3 or 4 years. I think that there could be something there. Had a little bit of an injury thing at the end of last season, but like I think that I kind of can see the vision here. If you're talking about profile, he's almost exactly a 50-50 split between his slider and his fastball. Those are the only two pitches he throws. Pretty simple here. Last year, he was bad because his slider was horrible. It was unbelievably ineffective. It got crushed. I'm talking like batting average pushing 400 and slugging percentage looking like a Barry Bonds stat line. Like, just got absolutely cranked. And his fastball, which he still threw like 48% of the time, was almost unhittable. And I think the reason why is because people just sat slider. They're like, all right, we can crush this dude's slider. We're just going to pretend like everything's a slider and he'll eventually throw me one. Really good strikeout numbers his entire career. Doesn't walk a ton of guys. Never really has. I think it's really is like, if this coaching staff can get his slider to even be semi-efficient again, then he'll be a valuable low leverage right-handed pitcher that can specialize against right-handed hitters. That's been a platoon that has been in his favor for most of his major league career as well, because he's slider fastball, just naturally. You're going to do better against right-handed hitting there. The contract is $2.25 million in 2025 and a team option for $4 million in 2026. So if they do, quote unquote, fix his slider, then they can have him for another year for a pretty cheap contract. I'm never mad at bullpen depth. I have no idea if this is going to work out. If he starts looking like he did last year and if the slider doesn't get fixed, then he's not going to make it throughout the season, and you're going to count your losses with $225 million and a $500,000 buyout. But if this coaching staff, I trust this coaching staff blindly. That's how good they are. Like I if they think that they can tweak something or they see something that they like and that they can maybe work with and get him to adjust to get to where they want him to be, then so be it. Okay, thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shots to everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday recapping more of Tigers camp and starting to roll out our preseason calendar. We got player previews coming up. We got roster projection number 1 coming up. We got a lot of fun stuff here. Baseball is back. Let's root for the guys that are in the old English G and wannabe. All right. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all Monday, baby. Go Tigers.